Hello and welcome to Thrill of the Hill. My name's Alex Perry and this is the Farm Advisory Service podcast where we cover the topics and stories impacting the farmed upland environment. In today's episode, we sit down with two powerhouses of organic farming in Scotland, SOPA and the Soil Association. Organic farming's not for everyone, but its popularity is growing across Scotland and on the international stage too. So what could be in it for you? How does someone even begin to go organic? And how will they be supported? Well, thankfully, Debs and David are here to shed some light on this topic. Hello, David, Debs, how are you both doing?
Good, thank you.
Very well, thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much for both of you for coming on the podcast. It's been a long time since we've had multiple speakers on at the one time, but this is going to go like clockwork, I'm sure. David, can I just get kicked off with yourself? Can we get a bit of an introduction as to what the Soil Association is aiming to do with organics and a little bit of a background into what you do?
Yes, of course. So Soil Association is a membership charity. It's been running now for more than 75 years, focused on sustainable food production, including organic. We have a group now with different arms. So we have a separate certification arm, which does the actual certification process on farm and also right through the supply chain and into things like textiles and aquaculture now, as well as land-based agriculture. And my role within that, I am head of policy and co-director for Scotland for the Soil Association charity. And as I say, the certification arm is a wholly owned subsidiary. I'm also a licensee, so I have some experience from being on the other side of the fence, as it were, going through the inspection and conversion process.
Brilliant. And Debs, similar kind of question, introduction as to who you are and the work that SOPA is doing throughout Scotland.
Thank you. Yes, well, SOPA is the Scottish Organic Producers Association. We're a non-trading cooperative, so we're registered as a membership society. So all of our members are certified according to the SOPA standards, the organic standards that we have sort of built around being quite particular towards Scotland and the agricultural conditions and types of farming that we have in Scotland. So our members cover producers and processors, all dedicated to organic. That would be the common theme. And so there's basically two arms to SOPA. We have the sort of the membership support services, which I'm leader of, and we offer advice and guidance and a lot of support to members, whether they be in conversion or they've been organic for decades. So everybody has a right to that. We offer that for free. And then the second arm is the certification side of things, which we contract out so that we have a very clear line between what is certification and there is no risk of a conflict of interest between the advice and the guidance support services that we offer. So that's SOPA. However, my background is I farm with my husband and family, and we have 500 acres in Perthshire. We've been organic for about 28 years. I do kind of lose touch a little bit, but we have suckler cows. We grow about 150 acres of cereal, so it's a nice mixed rotation. We also have a couple of micro flocks of organic poultry, laying hens, and we sell our eggs and some of our beef and lamb through a little honesty shop that we have at the end of our road, which is very much dedicated to Scottish artisan foods. A lot of it is organic, but not all. As long as they're artisan and they're trying to sort of bring the consumer, people who are interested in Scottish food, back to being able to buy it and not have to rely on supermarkets. So a nice different offering. It's been really valuable for us to sort of reach out with the consumers. Very interesting.
Brilliant. And I'm sure we'll get stuck into some of that in this discussion this afternoon. Just wanting to set the scene, obviously this is the Thrill of the Hill podcast, so we are primarily interested in less favoured area, the uplands of Scotland, profitable farming, but also farming in line with nature, conservation and climate change. So with that in mind, David, I hope you don't mind me asking you, but you attended last week now the Nature Friendly Farming Conference in Edinburgh. You were a speaker at the event. I just wanted to get your reflections on the event and how you felt it went.
I thought it was a great event organised by Nature Friendly Farming Network, and credit to the guys there for putting it together. Very timely, I think, as we're heading towards another election in Scotland, and we had the Agriculture Minister Jim Fairley in attendance, and he spoke. And one of the things he talked about was the fact that there's going to be a reopening of the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme window early next year, which will include payments for organic conversion and maintenance, which is always good news to hear. I think more broadly, my reflection is that at the very beginning, one of the speakers asked of the room, how many people were farmers in the room, and often with these events, it can be kind of overpopulated, if you like, by NGOs or academics. And actually, in this instance, about half the room put their hand up and said that they were farmers, which I thought was great. And there really was that real kind of focus on practice and the experience of farmers that are adopting nature-friendly approaches like organic. So yeah, really good event.
And again, I'm sure we'll get into this in the latter half of the podcast. Listeners of the podcast will know that I'm a big advocate for the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, and I certainly was very happy to hear that it had been extended. There's certainly room for improvements, and I think there were discussions about potential changes being made to it in the coming years. So we'll wait and see how that all plays out. But no, I thought the conference was great. Long may it continue, and let's hold out for year two. I just want we'll get stuck into the main body of the discussion now. Can I just ask both of you for a quick overview of where you see organic farming in Scotland today? What's the state of play?
Yeah, I think it's very positive. The recent figures published by the Scottish Government are showing 6 years of steady growth in the land area for organic farming, which equates to a 26% increase from 2018 to 2024. And in terms of land and conversion, there's 27,000 hectares in conversion in 2024, which is double the total from the previous year and 3 times the total from 2018. And we'll probably get into some of the reasons for that and the kind of opportunity and the challenge that brings. But it does seem that Scotland is bucking the trend in terms of organic land area compared to other parts of the UK.
And can I add to that? I think that is a direct reflection of the EAT support and the funding support that Scottish Government have shown over the last few years. And also, we also welcome with the news that the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme is going to continue going forward, because that is it just makes such a difference to farmers who were considering about converting and helping them get through that first couple of years. So the funding is essential. So it's been good news to know that there's confidence going forward on that front. But there are other things also that are quite positive in the sector at the moment. It's a nice time of year. I mean, we're just in October just now while we're recording this, so it's the harvest is gathered, if you like, and it gives us a nice time an opportunity to sit down and just sort of look at where the market has sat. And across the board, for pretty much all the organic produced commodities in Scotland, there are good premium at the moment. Particularly for organic oats, I would like to highlight that this year is the first year that I've ever known there to be contracts available for growing organic oats. So, and those contracts were also at the highest price that we've ever seen. They were in the region of £350 a tonne. So it's been a very good positive sign for organic farmers who grow oats or even in cropping to be able to include oats in their rotation. So that's been a positive. I think on the livestock front, beef and lamb prices have pretty much mirrored the increases that we're seeing in the non-organic sector over the last 12, 18 months. Some of them hitting record prices, but there is still a premium for organic beef and lamb traditionally you would always think that, well, there's a lot of lamb come onto the organic market sort of August, September time, and there's a bit of a dip, and there tends to be maybe a little bit of a blockage in throughput getting lambs booked into abattoir. It's not been too bad this year. We've not seen a loss of premium, but one of the things that we really have to advise our farmers is to make sure you've got your routes to market, so that you know that the abattoir, you've got a close working relationship with your abattoir to be able to move the animals off farm when they're ready. And I think just touching on eggs, I think we're seeing a real shortage of organic eggs at the moment. I'm speaking to a number of different egg producers throughout Scotland, from Aberdeenshire down to Edinburgh, and everywhere in between. And everybody is saying they're short of eggs. So there's a real demand for organic eggs just now too. So yes, it's lots of positive things from both fronts. The funding side, that push factor, if you like, from Scottish Government, and also all of the market premiums being that pull factor, giving the farmers a good confidence to continue.
Brilliant. We talked briefly about the Nature Friendly Farming Conference through in Edinburgh, David. A question for both of you. How do you think organic farming fits into Scotland's wider agriculture and climate change and nature targets? I mean, things are looking fairly positive, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, we see organic as being more than just a farming system or an approach to farming. In policy terms, it's a tool that can deliver on multiple different objectives. If you think about increasing biodiversity on farm, adapting to a changing climate, delivering high quality food production, delivering high standards of animal welfare, I think you can make a pretty good case that organic delivers on all of the objectives of the 2024 Agriculture and Rural Communities Act. And I think to continue that analogy of the policy tool, I was at an organic summit recently in Denmark, and someone described organic as a Swiss Army knife, and it does lots of different things. And I think that's the case, particularly in relation to the targets that we've got from government right now around climate and nature.
Yeah, I agree with David. I mean, it's traditionally seen as because it covers so many different facets and everything has to fit together like a jigsaw. But the organic standards are the baseline for what organic farmers have to operate to. So the standards are set in law, so they are regulations, and some of them might seem a little sort of out of context occasionally, but they are there designed to protect animal welfare and to also protect all of the biodiversity. So we're talking about invertebrates, vertebrates, birds, not just mammals. It's across the whole ecological food chain, including the soil food web. So when the standards talk about things like not using artificial fertilizers or chemicals, that's there to protect, to create a diversity, literally a biodiversity, and those are the sort of the foundation rules for managing an organic farm. So from a farm management perspective, sometimes it may think that you're not, that the standards are requiring you to do things that affect the way your output, your farm output is measured, but actually it's there from a holistic point of view, and these standards are there to help protect everything within the farm, not just the farmer, but the livestock and all of the biodiversity as well.
So let's get kicked off with the conversion journey then. So hypothetically, I'm a farmer who's interested in going organic. Um, where should I start the journey? I mean, where do I go for advice? And what's the first thing I should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think probably the best thing you could do is pick up the phone and contact ourselves at Soil Association or the guys at SOPA. Certification team, we're more than happy to talk through with individual farmers what the conversion process involves and answer any questions that they might have before they kind of get to the stage of deciding if it's the right thing or something they want to progress with. Otherwise, you can go online. There's lots of information on the Soil Association website about conversion for different farm types, about the organic standards, which Debs has referred to already. You can, inform yourself and read up about what the standards involved to prepare for how that might affect your particular farm business. And I think another way which many people can do, is talk to a neighbour or someone that you might know who's already farming organically, and talk to them what their experience has been, and also to look out for events. So there might be events arranged through the Farm Advisory Service or through organisations like ourselves, farm walks and workshops that are focused on organic production, which can be a good opportunity just to kind of dip your toe in and get some questions answered if you're thinking about going into organic.
Definitely, events and searching online are really good ways of starting to interact with the organic network and the people who are involved in it. I would also add that ideally you should speak to somebody who knows the business, who knows organic sector, and has qualifications in that in organic farming. And I would also recommend that you check out the standards, the organic standards, and make sure that the farmer is familiarising themselves that they are able to meet them. And that's one of the ways that speaking to somebody direct, you can access pretty much bespoke advice about your farm business and how the organic standards will work for you, so that it cuts out a lot of time researching. You can speak to somebody who knows the sector and knows what the standards mean.
And what are kind of the key steps in the certification process, and how long does conversion generally take?
Yeah, I think as Debs has just said, every farm is different, so it's important to understand the requirements of the organic standards first, and prepare for any changes that you'll need to make. And doing a bit of research around sort of payment options. We've talked already about the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme and the windows for application. Familiarising yourself with those is a good idea. There's an application form process with ourselves where you essentially have to go into a full description of your farm and all the activities undertaking, including, for example, when the last inputs of any agrochemicals might have been that you'll then be phasing out. You'll be assigned a certification officer to deal directly with you as you go through the conversion process, and then they can guide you from that point on in terms of the initial application inspection, where somebody will come out on farm and walk through with you and give pointers on what you still need to do to comply with the standards before you go on to get your first certificate. In terms of the conversion period, typically about 2 years. There is scope within the regulation to speed this up or reduce it by up to about 4 months if you can demonstrate that you've been managing the land according to organic standards before entering conversion. But generally speaking, it's about 2 years, and that can start from the day that we receive the completed application form, or you can set a date in the future, and you can convert the farm in stages, or you can convert part of the farm or the whole farm. And I think selecting that time of year and the right date for you is really important to make sure that it suits your enterprise, whether you're cropping or your livestock management plans that you have, and very much kind of context dependent to your situation.
It can be a complicated thing. David's quite right, but there are steps to follow, and I revert back to just what I was saying a couple of minutes ago, is that it is really important to speak to somebody who knows the standards and who knows how EECS works. So choose your advisor carefully, because there are different things that need to happen depending on your farm enterprises. So you might choose a different type of conversion for your livestock, whether it be simultaneous or standard. The conversion period for the land still needs to be 2 years, but there are little tweaks that might apply in different situations. So it is really important you speak to somebody who knows how the organic standards work and how to interpret them at a farm level. The other thing that is really important is trying to overlay, if you like, the EECS timelines, the EECS deadlines. If you wish to apply for funding, then you need to be able to understand how the EECS deadlines and the timeline for applications and all the way through the funding application, how that works and how you can fit that into your conversion planning. So I do recommend you speak to somebody very knowledgeable about how those two, the organic standards and the EECS timeline, can knit together for the farmer. And the other thing, just talking about conversion planning, which David touched on there, it is very much a whole farm report that is required before you commence organic conversion, and that covers all things from farm maps and field identifiers and areas, right through to the type of livestock, how many livestock, animal health planning, so that there is a little bit of involvement with your vet, looking at what you use for vet meds just now and how you plan and intend to be using vet meds when you're fully organic. So there's lots of little bits and pieces that need to be touched on, not just the cropping, but across the whole spectrum of livestock as well.
And obviously, regarding the conversion process, both the Soil Association and SOPA will do things. There'll be some consistency between the two of you, and there'll be some differences. What are some of the differences that you would like to outline that kind of differentiate between the two organisations?
So I think in terms of if we're being specific about the conversion process, there shouldn't really be differences in the sense that we're both working to the GB organic regulation and certifying to that. The Soil Association, when it comes to standards, we do have Soil Association higher standards, which are a set of standards that exceed the minimum UK requirements. So I referred there to the GB regulation, and those are stricter in some areas. So some examples of those might be housing requirements for livestock, um, packaging for products entering the supply chain, switching land between organic and non-organic, um, producing organic fleece, and the use of organophosphate sheep dips. All of those are examples of things that are in those higher standards, which are in addition to the standards within the GB regulation.
As far as SOPA is concerned, we do recognise that the standards, specifically for Scotland, there will be tweaks in there. As David says, there are some, you can't go below the baseline, which is the GB organic regulation. However, there are some areas where you could make the standards higher or more stringent. So we would be operating across the board to the same baseline standards between SOPA and Soil Association, because both standards are approved by GB.org, by DEFRA, to be recognised by GB.org regulation. There are some parts of, as David says, it's little bits about wool and some of the vet meds. I suppose specifically on the veterinary medicine areas, the SOPA request that there be a double withdrawal of the period for any vet meds that are used. So if you're using a wormer and the withdrawal period is 5 days, then in the SOPA standards it would be doubled to 10 days. And that's across the board for all, except for the use of OP dips, which can be used but only in extreme circumstances and with prior approval. So it's not like a concern where you can't use a dip. And actually that is something I would reinforce, is that a lot of people may think from the outside looking in that organic animals can't be treated with anything, which is a complete fallacy. In that actual fact, you can and you should treat a sick animal. It's just the way that we approach the use of veterinary medicines is on a precautionary and not prophylactically. So it's still possible to treat animals, and you should.
And I wanted to get your opinions on what some of the biggest challenges are that you think farmers face during conversion. I mean, there'll obviously be some financial considerations, there'll be practical on the ground things that need to change, and then there'll be mindset as well. I mean, where do the two of you sit in terms of what are the real stumbling blocks for people?
Yeah, I talked to some of our certification officers, the long-serving guys in preparation for this, and it was interesting the responses that all three of those came up, as being challenges, the financial, practical mindset. But I think of the three, that mindset shift can often be one of the biggest hurdles, in the sense that there might be ways that you've already done things in the past that have to change, and that can be quite difficult to get your head around. Even if it means, in some cases, if you're making changes that you might be spending less, for example, on inputs, whether that's synthetic fertilizers or pesticides or feed, that you're very accustomed to doing things a certain way, and that in itself can be quite a big shift. And likewise, Debs has alluded to that more preventative, precautionary health approach to livestock, which can be a big shift in not having, for example, the routine use of wormers or antibiotics as you may have had in the past, and thinking about, or should I say, not always thinking about maximizing production, but thinking more about profitability and the benefits of having healthier animals and healthier soils.
I've helped hundreds of farmers convert over my career in the organic sector, and I can count on less than the fingers of one hand how many have been motivated by saving the world type ethical concerns. They are all driven by finances, and that is why the EECS scheme is so valuable. That funding support from Scottish Government is so important. However, it is really fascinating watching people go through the journey of conversion, because David's quite right. Mindset is the biggest barrier once we've got into that first few months of the 2-year conversion period. And it's fascinating to watch farmers go from the financial motivation through to the principle, and how they start to see organic farming change their farm, how they can take their foot off the pedal a little bit and relax, and they start to see natural rhythms come into their farm. They start to observe and listen more to what's happening out on the farm. You're not governed by the rules on a fertilizer bag anymore, or a spray bag anymore, a spray bottle anymore. So you start to think about things in a much more holistic and a wider perspective. And the number of farmers who have told me that they look at their farm in a completely different way now that they're organic. So there is a personal journey, not a word I like to use very often, but you see people transist, they move through so many different approaches and feelings about their farm. So it can be really enlightening, actually, and it's quite rewarding to see people move. The financials don't go away, but they become less important, because they're starting to be fascinated about what's actually happening in their soils, what's happening with the biodiversity, and how their crops and their animals are responding to the different way of farming that organic farming brings.
Once converted, Debs, what are some of the day-to-day challenges that people find in terms of staying organic?
In actual fact, there's always going to be something that gets thrown up. More often than it's not done. It's something that might be completely inadvertent, whether it be weather related or a disease that hits your sheep flock or whatever it might be. So those things can be unpredicted. The one key bit of advice, well, there's actually two really important pieces of advice, and one is to build your network. So if I was a farmer, I've just gone through conversion, then I'm still learning the process, and there's still things that I need to learn about my farm, and also how the standards can operate. So I need a network of knowledge around me, and that means building relationships with your advisor, your chosen advisor. So you really need to have somebody who knows what they're talking about, has got the experience and the qualifications to keep you on the right path. I would also say that network includes going to events and trying to meet up with other organic farmers, because the amount of peer-to-peer knowledge that we see is beyond anything that you can get by reading a book. So those chats that you get with other organic farmers are invaluable, and everybody is happy to share their experience, and there's always a little tip or a hint for something that might be worrying you. In general, if the rotations are good and if your weed management is good with topping and so on, you shouldn't see a dramatic cliff fall off the edge with fertility and things like that. It's all about getting the foundations right, and if you just then settle, let the farm work, you will see that it finds its own balance. And And there is not really any reason why you shouldn't be using things like lime, which, as far as soil science is concerned, should be absolutely essential. So it is a baseline requirement, and has been for decades, that you be soil sampling and making sure that you keep on top of any of your fertility requirements where there are deficiencies. So it's not a blanket treatment, but lime is the core to that, I believe. When you look at the soil science, and if you see soil starting to decline in their pH levels, then that's where farmers have taken their eye off the ball and they're seeing a problem. So I would recommend that they keep an eye on those basic things.
Really encouraging to hear you say that, because we've discussed soil management and liming on the podcast before, and the general consensus is that across the board throughout Scotland we just need to be applying more lime. We need to be addressing low pHs. So great that even in the organic context that's still the case.
Probably more important than any other type of farming, to be honest, because if you keep your soil sweet with lime, then all of your other soil nutrients will start to fall into place. So yeah, it is absolutely essential. Don't forget to keep an eye on that.
So, David, we've just discussed some of the challenges with the conversion period, and how farmers achieve organic status. But what are some of the day-to-day challenges for farmers once they've achieved that status?
Yeah, I think it can depend on the farm type, but we do find in the early years that there might be things that come up that are challenging, which I think is why good advice is so important. And Deb's mentioned that earlier, and it's worth reinforcing of the ability to have someone or people to go to get really knowledgeable information and advice, and that might be directly through an advisor, but it might be through peer support at events, or through a network that where people can share best practice. But challenges can range from managing weeds, dealing with pest outbreaks, disease, or even things like sourcing compliant feed, or sourcing, for example, replacement ewes or replacement pullets, depending on the type of system that you have, or even on finding, accessing markets for your organic produce. And I think, generally speaking, that a lot of this comes down to, how you're managing the farm in terms of fertility building. And in organic systems, you're generally aiming for a closed loop, so you're adopting principles of circularity, or using waste like animal manures back into the soil to help provide fertility for crops. You're also heavily reliant on crop rotations, and we could probably have a whole separate podcast about uh, crop rotations. But general rules such as having a minimum return period for the same crop, so you're not going back in the same field to the same crop and recurring years, and that can help to break the cycle, or the build-up of any weeds, pests, and diseases. And likewise with encouraging biological pest control, so using or encouraging beneficial insects, and the use of varieties that are going to have a natural resistance to certain pests and diseases. All these techniques and practices are going to be far better long-term solutions, as opposed to what may seem like an easier option, which is to reach for a kind of chemical intervention or input.
That's great. Can I just ask, David, are there any examples of any innovations or any unique practices that you think have worked particularly well in Scotland within organics?
Yeah, I think there's great examples of organic farmers trying new things all the time, from experimenting with intercropping, green manures, integrating trees. We're constantly impressed by the things that we see and the things that we've been involved in. So the Soil Association has been running the Innovative Farmers project, or the program, for about more than 10 years now, and that's bringing together groups of farmers together with researchers, academics, to tackle challenges relating to might be pests or disease, or innovative solutions. And whether it's things like using pigs to reduce couchgrass burdens or invasions, or different techniques for composting. I can think of one organic farmer in Perthshire at the moment that's doing a field lab on bokashi composting systems, and that same farmer was one of the first to really properly integrate trees and woodland into a grazing regime in an upland setting as well. So I feel like there's a history there of innovation in organic farming, and it's certainly continuing.
And Debs?
Yeah, one of the most exciting things that we're working with some of our farmers at the moment is on microbial inputs to soil and how that can impact and stimulate the soil food web. So we're going right back to microscopic stuff and feeding the bacteria, which then trap nitrogen in their skeletal systems, and they become the basis of the soil food web. So when the next insect eats them, the next invertebrate, and so on up the chain. So we're seeing a real benefit to the composting of farmyard manures, and just how it works. And it's actually just a compost tea. We've been trialing it on our farm for 3 years, and the difference it makes is you might think it quite subtle at farm level, but when you see the difference it makes to the dung, it is quite incredible how it activates composting. And it's also reducing the volatilization of nitrogen. So your dung, traditionally when you're emptying out the sheds, there's a smell. So when we're talking about air quality, I've never really come across anything that can resolve that issue as using these beneficial microbes, these sort of anaerobic microbes in the compost tea, because they suck the nitrogen out of the air and they keep it in that substrate in the compost or the ground. So in a way, what we're doing with this is harvesting and trapping natural nitrogen into the soil profile, which is where we want it. So it's the next step on from using legumes, and legumes are the basis for organic productivity in grassland and cropping. So yeah, that's an exciting trial of innovation that we're looking at just now, that a few farmers are tapping into, and it's we run a network of cereal growers throughout Scotland who are always asking really interesting questions of each other and feeding in their knowledge so that we're sharing it that way. And so it seems to be working. Very early days, and we'll look forward to it being a real game changer as far as nitrogen is concerned, and composting for organic matter, which everybody's talking about these days. But the reports that we're hearing anecdotally are that the farmers are seeing a good increase of organic matter in their soils. So it's that's what's catching our interest at the moment.
It sounds really exciting. Do you know, it's long been a kind of thought in the back of my head that even if you're a business in Scotland that's not interested in going organic, there's still principles and practices that you can pick up from these producers. And it is just going back to the mindset thing. It is just getting over that hurdle, that maybe you don't need a spray, or maybe you don't need that inorganic fertilizer, or maybe there is an alternative to doing things the way that they've always been done. So no, it's good to hear that there's exciting stuff happening. Can I just we'll just move on a little bit to markets, and what the market's looking like for organics in Scotland. We've talked a little bit about oats and it being a really great year for oats at the beginning of the podcast, but David, can you just give us a kind of market outlook for organic produce in Scotland and beyond? I mean, what's happening? What's the wider picture?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the Soil Association publishes an organic market report each year, and that's UK wide, and including data from Scotland. And what that's showing us is that the organic market's in its 13th year of consecutive growth and is now worth a combined £3.7 billion. And I think significantly underneath those headline figures is the fact that sales of organic are actually outperforming non-organic, both in terms of value and also in terms of unit sales. And as you mentioned there, and as Deb's mentioned earlier in the podcast, that Scotland farmers are finding new markets, and it's been a good year for organic oats. And I think that there's probably a lot of different reasons for that, and there's growing popularity of things like organic oat milk, or the kind of on-the-go porridge pots, lots of different products, as well as the kind of more traditional porridge oats that we're starting to see. So it does feel like that's a potential growth area in future as well. And the other thing I think to mention about that wider market demand is that in the UK as a whole, and the demand's currently outstripping the rise in organic production, organic land area, and the only people that are going to benefit from that are going to be organic farmers in Europe that will be filling that gap that we're, in terms of what we're not producing domestically. So I think Scotland's been the exception there in terms of organic land area, certainly, whereas in England it's been quite static. In Scotland, as I said earlier, we're in 6 years of consecutive growth, and I think that the key thing there is making sure that of the new farmers that are coming into organic, to make sure that they have those routes to market for their product.
From our perspective, I think the conversations we've been having recently is very much about enterprise. Organic farmers are looking to grow. Organic businesses are looking for more product. We're currently speaking with a number of different people who are asking all sorts of different questions, but hot topics recently have been very small horticultural plots or fruit and veg, and how we can get some people, how they can get that from the ground to the market. So the market is asking for those, and they're looking for growers. So there's a demand there for organic veg to be grown in Scotland, whether that be field scale or on a small holding horticultural basis. As I mentioned earlier, eggs are in a shortage. So that's another little bright light, if you like. And I agree with David. I mean, what we're needing to be doing is becoming more self-sufficient in the food that we produce here in Scotland. And there is always room for artisan products that are coming with a story behind them. So there is a lot of exciting stuff out there, potential and existing, for organic and produced in Scotland.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we are recording this podcast in the shadow of the Scottish Smallholders Festival this coming weekend. Can I just ask you both about what you think the role of smaller farms and mixed farms, even crofts, are in making organics work in Scotland?
Yeah, I think I can speak from experience there. My wife and I are smallholders. We're organically certified. We have been for several years now, and we're producing fruit and veg at a small scale, selling that locally, delivering veg boxes to people within a kind of 10-mile radius of where we are in the north of Aberdeenshire. And as a result of that, and obviously through the day job at the Soil Association, I've come into contact with lots of other smallholders and smaller producers and crofters that are doing the same things, that finding direct routes to market. And I think that there's lots of benefits to that, and certainly in terms of the control over the price at which you're selling, and then the retention of the value, so you're not losing that value in the supply chain, because you've got that direct relationship with customers. And I think that Deb's touched upon this in her last answer. People are increasingly looking for that, and there's an enormous enthusiasm for locally grown or organic produce of all types, not just limited to fruit and veg.
And Debs, any thought on the role of crofts and small farms with regards to organic?
We have a number of crafts on our books in our membership, if you like, and they do vary in size and also type of diversity and type of enterprise and what they can produce. In our experience, it's, as David says, reaching out to that local market and that community, that food community who are engaged with food that's being produced close to them. However, there's a real benefit we've found in having crafters work together, so that they increase their power, if you like, their access to market and their voice. So that would be one of the recommendations that we would be making, is that working together and creating networks is a really useful way. But that doesn't mean you still can't create your own identity at a local basis. And they have some wonderful stories and some amazing products coming out, whether that be wool or meat, just crafts. So many fantastic things that can be done. So really interesting, fascinating stories. It's a great potential there.
And kind of taking a look ahead to the future of organics in Scotland, where do you see some of the biggest opportunities in the next kind of 10, 20 years?
I mean, I think the direction of travel is really positive, and we've talked a lot about that today already. I think in terms of the kind of the positive in terms of policies. So we've got a Scottish government that has been vocally committed to organic farming and set a target at the beginning of this parliamentary term to double the area of organic land. It's also committed to producing an organic action plan to help drive that kind of market development piece that we've talked about as well. And I think that, in general, policy support for agriculture is shifting towards a greater focus on delivery of environmental outcomes. And I think organic's really well placed to contribute to that. And I think if we can get the balance right between incentivizing conversion, but also developing markets for organic produce and helping to address barriers in the supply chain, and things like processing capacity, for example, but also looking at ways in which we can grow demand for organic produce. And I think public procurement, the public sector has a big role to play there in generating that demand. Then I think the future's very bright indeed.
And
David's
Debs,
correct. Yeah, David is correct. The policy framework at the moment is very supportive, and not just with the agri-environment scheme, but just the general messaging about organic and regenerative farming being a step towards organic having a legal standard, which is the ultimate aim, if you like. So yeah, the policy messages are very positive, and that's encouraging. One of the other policies that we're very keen to see develop is the Good Food Nation policy, and how that's reaching out to communities, because we all eat food. That's the single thing that's the most common between all of us. We have some people produce it, some people make it, but every single one of us eats food. And so there is getting that right, getting it to Scottish produced, that's healthy, good food for the nation. All of that is going to be a great bonus for organic slotting in to help meet those policy aims. So that's the policy, that's the big picture stuff. But if they get those foundations right, then we will have that change develop on the ground as well. And we still need those people who are out there producing food in a safe and healthy, free of chemicals way. And that is food that we're carrying the organic logo, that it has been produced according to those standards. So I think that's where the people who are buying our food and eating food, they can be trusting that there is an authentic food production system that is not creating harm and is produced in Scotland. So that's down the line. That would be where we want to be saying a nice Scottish community, Scottish produced food feeding the nation.
sounds great. Can I also ask? There will be a number of farmers listening to this podcast who are particularly interested in potentially going organic, but they're a little bit hesitant. I mean, what's one of the myths that you would like to bust on the podcast? What's something that is always thought about the sector that's just not right that you want to correct here?
I think Deb's touched upon this earlier, but for me, that it's not all about what you're not allowed to do. I think from the outside looking in, it can sometimes seem that organic is all about restricting what you can do and saying you can't do this and you can't do that. And actually, what many people find is as they go through the conversion, they start to reduce inputs and reduce costs. And yes, there may be a drop off in terms of production in the shorter term, but in the longer term, you're going to have a healthier system, healthier soils, healthier animals, which is going to provide much more resilience. And I think that's a word we're hearing more and more at the moment, and it's only going to become more important as we continue to adapt to a changing climate. And we're seeing signs of this already. It's already with us. So I think that organic has a positive place within that in terms of making our agricultural systems more resilient.
Myth busting, I think I have touched on this already. The key myth that is commonly raised, most often raised with me, is that organic animals cannot be treated with veterinary medicines, and it is just so completely not true. You can treat, but there are certain controls that need to be put in place about, and most of them are what people are doing anyway, where the industry is pushing farmers towards this at the moment. So rotating products for fungicides and worms, and not routinely, but testing first. Taking fecal egg counts and just treating when you need to treat. So that's probably the biggest myth. The second biggest myth is that Scotland's organic farmers will never feed the world. And actually, when I think about that, I kind of think, well, I'm not sure if that's very true. It doesn't matter if we want to feed the world or not, because actually Scotland can't produce the world either. We can't feed the world. So, as a nation, we can look after feeding ourselves. And if we can try and do that with food that is produced in an ethical way, that doesn't harm the environment, that is good for animals, and it's not using chemicals, and it's still safe to eat, then there are just boxes that can be ticked there. And so as an organic industry, we are trying to contribute to these wider aims of the society.
That's great, folks. Final question for you both, really. If you are interested in going organic, if you've listened to this podcast and you think this might be an avenue for me, what's the first step that you should take after listening to the episode?
Get in touch. Give us a call, email us, contact us via social media.
And Debs?
Yeah, I reiterate that. Just get in touch. That's the most important thing. Here at SOPA, we have a small team, but where we wear the wellies. We all have farming background, and we have qualifications in organic farming. So our role is to provide free advice to our members, and we can guide you through with bespoke advice that's tailored to your farm and your farm enterprises and what you want to be able to do with the future and your ambitions for your farm. So that would be my recommendation, and just reach out to other organic farmers and organic advisors. Just try and soak up as much information as you possibly can. To speak with SOPA, Facebook, we're at Scottish Organic. We also have emails, info@sopa.org.uk, and perhaps the best would be our phone number, which is 0300 772 9795. We always have an expert on hand to answer the calls there. The other thing I might just say is I'm not sure of the publication date, but do keep out for invitations and news of diary dates for meetings that are coming up. SOPA's National Organic Conference is happening on the 29th of October, so in a couple of weeks near Perth. So that would be a good thing to keep an eye out for as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to both of you once again. On behalf of the Scottish Farm Advisory Service, we will draw the podcast to a close. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Thrill the Hill. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not try the Natural Capital podcast with Harry Fisher, or join Tiffany Stevenson over on Cropcast. Thrill the Hill was brought to you in association with the Scottish Government. Executive Producer Kerry Hammond, Producer Helen Cowie, and Editor Kieran Sim.
The Farm Advisory Service podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.